required to, excuse me. We would just love to know, where you're from and get to know everybody that's here. So we also want to let you know that we are recording this webinar. You'll be able to find the recording on our YouTube channel, and we're also live streaming it on our Facebook page. So as well as our chat box, we also have a Q&A box, which is where you can put questions during the webinar, and it'll help you get them answered by the time we end. So please also feel free to put any comments into the chat box, and we'll be adding links to our YouTube channel, our Facebook page, and our feedback survey. So this is super important because we do love to hear and learn from your feedback. So please, if you can fill out a feedback survey at the end of the webinar, we'd be really grateful. So again, the Q&A box is separate from the chat box. You'll find the Q&A box down on your Zoom toolbar as well, for those of you who might not be familiar with that. And feel free to put your comment in the chat and your question in the Q&A box. So we'd love to get to know all of you, and we'll go ahead and take a look where everybody's from. Montreal, California, Alaska. Looks great. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Jane and Angie, and I'll go ahead and let Jane introduce herself first, and then we'll go to Angie and she can introduce herself, tell us a little bit about themselves.
Hi, my name is Jane Akabuchi, and I'm from the East Coast, the Philadelphia area. I'm a special education teacher working with deaf and hard of hearing students. I work with ages preschool to 12th grade. My role involves a lot of developing and implementing personalized instructional programs tailored to meet their unique needs. I've been doing it for 20 years. I'm still currently in the trenches of teaching, and again, I love using boom cards. So I'm very excited to be here today.
Thank you so much, Jane. We appreciate having you, that's for sure. And then we'll move on to Angie. And do you want to tell us a little bit about yourself before we start?
My name's Angie Seltzer. I live near Dayton, Ohio. I've been creating boom card activities for about 6 years. I've retired from a background of editing textbooks and assessment resources for major publishers for elementary and high school. I did a lot of comparing state standards as we worked on different textbooks, and we looked across various states. Now I enjoy spending time tutoring math and writing supplemental materials, including lots of boom cards.
Thank you so much. Thanks, Angie. We know that you writing textbooks, we know that you know what these standards and these objectives really are for those of us that use all of those things. So thank you so much. And today we are going to cover educational standards. We are trying to demystify them today in our webinar. And so I'm going to go ahead and start our panel's questions. So our first question is, how do you look for boom cards that align with standards? And I'm going to go ahead and let Jane answer this one first, and then we'll move on to Angie. Oh, you're on mute, Jane. Oh, Jane, you're on mute. I'm going to click, yeah, just go ahead and take yourself off of mute.
Can you hear me now? Sorry, I apologize for that.
No problem.
And so we're going to start here. So finding boom cards that align with state standards and Common Core standards is very, very simple. I think we'll all kind of be surprised at how simple it is. So if we want to take a look here, this is kind of what the Common Core standards will look like. And when I'm thinking about it, I'm looking at an individual grade specific standard. We want to be identified by their strand, grade, and number. So first you're going to look at this. It's the ELA literacy. And as you can see in that top corner, it is the RL. And then it'll say it is 5-4. So what that means is it's grade 5 and it's the fourth strand underneath there. And as you can see, that goes into metaphors, figurative language. So the reason I just kind of wanted to show you this is how they're set up, and those numbers are what's very important. So when we want to find a boom card that aligns with a Common Core standard, you just have to go to the store. So let's see, again, this is the one, literacy, working, and I wanted to focus on multiple meaning words. So we're going to go and we're going to see what we can do. If we type it in to the search engine right there, all you have to do is type it in and hit the search button. You can see a variety of things come up. And what else is also important is you don't even have to type in the whole standard. You can just type in maybe the RL and then the 5.4, and you're going to get a different boom cards that are going to show up. So as you can see here, I even added an R, and I can still got relevant boom decks that I wanted to work on. And then over here, all I did was type in the RL and the 5.4. And again, relevant decks are popping up. So as I'm saying, this is very, very easy. So, and you could look on and you could just find out really what is unique for what you need to use. And that's the one thing great about it. Instead of just, here, let's look at this one. Let's say you're a kindergarten teacher and you want to do upper and lowercase letters. So demonstrates an understanding of the organization and basic features of print, recognizes and names all upper and lowercase letters. So here we can type in, we'll copy and paste it. We can use the whole name, or we can just use the shortened version. So if you can see, I typed in the whole version here, and there are numerous decks that are helping and working on upper and lowercase lettering. So again, the resources are endless. And let's see what we have over here. And then I just typed in the shortened version. And again, I got endless decks available. So this is great, because usually people have just been typing in oh, I want to do upper and lowercase letters, but this really targets the skill that you're measuring.
Super. Thank you so much, Jane. Appreciate it. All righty. And Angie, would you be willing to answer the same question? It's how do you...
Of course. Yes. Before I share any screens, I'm going to mention a little bit more about state standards. Now, everyone knows the standards are varying from state to state, but believe it or not, there's not nearly as much variation now as there was before Common Core. And Common Core standards for math and science, math and English, were implemented in 2010. And before 2010, some states might have had students learn volume like in grade 3. Other states didn't do it till grade 6. What happened then was publishers would put a little bit about volume in grades 3, 4, 5, and 6. And that would happen with a lot of different topics. So there was a phrase that the curriculum was a mile wide and an inch deep, because there was just a little bit of everything across so many grades. So after Common Core, about 40 of 50 states signed on to be part of that. And the publishers started doing more depth to the topics, because instead of teaching volume at all those different grades, now volume starts in grade 5. Usually the standards aren't going to call for that at any earlier grade. So the curriculum now is more consistent from state to state, and topics are taught in more depth than before 210. So because of the various requirements, companies are limiting what they put, but putting more depth. Now, some of that depth makes it more confusing, because teachers feel like all these explanations sometimes bog students down. But there's pros and cons to what's happened with Common Core. And using Boom decks, you can help cut through and find interesting topics that do have depth and yet are not confusing and are easy to track. So let's look at some Boom decks for a specific standard. And I'm going to use math. So I'm going to share my screen and go to the Boom screen here. So what do we have here? So we're going to go to the store and click decks because we're going to search for decks. And as Jane said, if we're looking for a deck, say that matches grade 3 measurement data, the math decks have clusters. So it might be cluster D and objective 8. And we can search and see what comes up. There are actually 3 different ways to search. Jane talked mostly about using keywords, but we can use the keywords as a Common Core standard here. And you can see that 3.md.d.8 is about perimeter because all these choices come up as perimeter. But actually not everyone tags it as perimeter. I mean, not everyone tags their perimeter decks with the standard. So you could just type in something like perimeter polygons. And now you get a little bit different results. So you really need to, if you're looking for specific kinds of questions, you might try searching for the standard or searching for the phrase, because different authors may have tagged the keywords differently. A third way to search is to use the subject and grade on the left. So for now, I'm going to clear out the perimeter of polygons up there and go over here to subject and grade. If we go down to math, elementary, we can go to measurement and data. And perimeter is actually a type of geometric measurement because we're doing geometric figures and finding measurements of those. So now you can see we have some of this, these are probably some of the same results, but also some may be different. And now you're getting more than just perimeter. You may also be getting area and volume because those are also geometric measurement. We can also refine it by doing the grade. And notice above, like this pink one that says perimeter polygons, it has several shaded boxes. Those show all of the refinements that are currently in place for your search. So if you want to broaden the search, you can take off one of those. Like if we take off the tag for geometric measurement, now we're back to a few different results than before. Suppose you want to do the perimeter polygons. Here's an example. I'll bring that up. This one is about missing sides. Remember that you can always click full-size preview and see 4 screens. This will allow you to make sure that the topic is appropriate for your students. In this case, you can see that the missing number to make a perimeter of 9 would have to be another 3, and we can check that, and sure enough, it works. And again, you can look at several different screens to decide if this deck is appropriate. So to summarize, you can search by your Common Core standard, by the topic in words, or you can use the refinement checkboxes on the left. And you might need to clear some of those out as you're searching to continue to find other options.
Super. Thank you so much, Angie. That's a great answer to that question as well. It's really clear. Appreciate it. So our next question is for Jane. And this question is, how do you use educational standards and Boom cards for summative assessment? So this is summative. This is your test, right? What we think of as testing. Go ahead. You want to take that away, Jane?
Yes. So we'll go. So when we're using cards for summative assessments, they can be innovative and in a very efficient way to evaluate a student's understanding and mastery of a standard at the end of a learning period. So let's say you've been working on, we'll go back to multiple meaning words, you've been doing your ELA language arts lesson, and the students have been working a lot on vocabulary and figurative language and multi-meaning words. So this would be, okay, I want to assess all my students and see what they have learned. And this is where we would do a summative assessment. And they're very easy to set up. As you can see here, I usually do mine, since I teach a variety of grades, you can either do it by class or you can do it by grade level. And all you have to do is you can put in all of your students, create your classroom. And that's very simple, easy to do. So let's go to the next. And then to assign the deck that you want to assess them on, I've selected this one student. Vivi, you're going to click on that blue arrow right here that I have circled. Then you're going to go down and you're going to assign the deck. So that's the important part. You want to make sure you have the appropriate deck assigned, and these can be whether you created them or whether they were purchased. So they can either be self-published or purchased, and you just collect, and you want to make sure that you have each student that you want to assess them, that it's in their profile. And then the students are just going to sign in. They will do this all on their own. They will take the assignment, the assessment on their own. The students will sign in with their username and password. And then right then and there, you can see I have them circled. You can see how well they did. If they got 6 out of 10, maybe 6 out of 10. And then over here is their performance and their accuracy map, which will actually show you which questions they got wrong. So it's very simple and fast. It's really a quick way to assess to see if the students have learned about multiple meaning words. And later on, I'm going to go through how to utilize all this data and to go through the different parts of this accuracy map. So I didn't want to expand on that here, but we'll all go in and show you more how we can look at all of this data and each of these of the data.
Super. Thank you so much, Jane. That's great. I appreciate it. So I'm going to go ahead and ask Angie a question, similar question. It's how do you use educational standards and boom cards for formative assessment? So a little bit different type of assessment. And how would you do that, Angie?
First, let me focus on math, and let me talk again for a minute about state math standards and how the standards are often assessed. Most assessments are more than just computation. For example, students may need to interpret visual models, compare situations, or write expressions or equations. Questions on the assessments are often designed to check for deep understanding, not just to recall and apply algorithms. So formative assessments can help you as a teacher catch and remediate errors in students' thinking. So when I'm looking at boom decks or creating boom decks, I look for opportunities where students will be able to discuss and compare the choices, and will be able to demonstrate deeper thinking. It's more than just word problems, although the word problems are definitely helpful in this situation, and state assessments do cover a lot of that. So let's look at a deck about perimeter and talk about how I might use it with my students. So let me share my screen and pull up a different perimeter deck. I have to get back to the menu here. So I'm going to look at this first one that comes up. and look at the full-size preview. And I'm going to skip this first question. The second question is a little better for this kind of discussion because you can see the grid behind the yellow rectangle. Now, boom cards are great when you're talking to students about their thinking because they can show nice and large with one question on a screen. You can really look at the parts of the screen with the student compared to if they're just looking at a worksheet question on a piece of paper where it's harder to discuss aspects of the question. So I do a lot of one-on-one tutoring, and on this question, there's some common types of errors. One error is that students might find the area instead of the perimeter. It looks like this one is 6 units by 11 units. So if they found the area, they might put down 66. And of course, that would be wrong. This is perimeter. Another problem is some people tend to think of a perimeter as a border and not as distance around. And if students start counting the border, they may count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15. They might not count that corner square. They might count the corner square instead of counting 2 edges along the side. So when I'm working with a student, if this one should be 34, but if they say 30, I might have them show me how they got the 30. And if they're counting those border squares, then I can help them understand the proper definition of perimeter right away, and that they can make notes either on a piece of paper or if it's a, well, anyways, they need to know that they have a 6 and an 11 and a 6 and 11 and add that up. Another thing to remind students is in case there's fractional edges, they really should think of starting at 0. So if they start at 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, that side of the figure is 6 units. Don't have them put little tick marks in the middle of each square, because then when they have to use something with fractions, they'll not be able to solve it as easily. Anyway, so that's an example of how I can make sure that I see that they're thinking about this correctly and using a correct procedure. Let me go back and show you another deck, one that I created that has a lot of options for discussion. So let me go back to the store. And in this case, I'm going to put in sampler, because this is a free sampler deck. I'm going to look at the one for grade 7. Okay. So I've created some free decks that I use with students to see if they understand adding integers. In this case, they're to match 2 different cards that represent the same value. So they might look down here at the one with the negative and positive chip images and see that it's -6 and +3. Well, it doesn't seem like there's a card that matches that, but they still could discuss it and analyze it on this screen. And these symbols, the ones with the infinity symbol, both have a value. We can see if one of these other things matches one of those values. As it turns out, -5 + 3 matches -2 + -3 + 3. So these 2 would be considered a match. So students have an opportunity to discuss this with a tutor or with a helper or with another student as they're trying to find the correct answer. I think I'm going to skip this one. This deck has 10 different screens that each have students finding equivalent expressions or values. In this case, it's rates. And you can think about each card and what the unit rate might be. Obviously, we would have to match meters per second with another card that's meters per second. So we can look at the different ones, and let's see. 3 grams in a half hour would be the same as 6 grams in an hour. And I'll look at one more. This one on probability. We want to find two cards that represent the same probability. So I'd probably look at the pictures first. The probability of a green marble looks like it would be 5 out of 8. Over here, the probability of a white sector looks like it's 2 out of 10. And I don't see any 5 8s or 2 out of 10, but we have 1 out of 8 matches 1/8 as a decimal, which is 0.125. Well, anyways, as you can see, this is an example of something where you could get students to explain their thinking, say what the values are when it's shown as an image, and basically just get a lot of practice and a lot of chance to use their higher order thinking as they're solving.
Super, thank you, Angie, appreciate that. It's a really nice and thorough response. So my next question that I have here for Jane is, how do you use boom cards and educational standards tracking multiple students?
Okay, so I'm going to go right here and I am going to go right to Boom and show you one of the classes that I have set up. So this is going to be my language arts class. And again, you set up all your students that are going to be joining, that are going to be, that are in your class that is going to be taking the assessment. This is my sample language arts class. Each student has an account set up with a username and password. And next, I really want to make sure that I have assigned the correct decks for the assessment. So here, what we can do is we can go up here to assignments. And as you can see right up here, it has assign more decks. So what you're going to do is you're going to click on, and then you're going to go down, okay, is this one that, are we going to do something that I've purchased or self-publish? You can go through all of your decks right there. And since I know that I want to do, let's say I wanted to do idioms. So I would go down there and great, all of my idiom decks are checked. And the one thing that's great about this is if you have a deck that you created that you haven't even published, you can still use that in your classes. So we'll go back. And now that we see that all my decks are assigned, that right then when you do that there, they should go right into all of the students. But if there was, you wanted to assess a student on just one deck, you could go in here and then select the assign. And let's say we wanted to add a special deck. Maybe you created another idioms deck that wasn't available for the other students because this student was maybe having a little bit of trouble. You could go right in there and assign a, let's say we have a vocabulary deck. Oh yeah, he doesn't know this vocabulary for the winter. So we'll just click on that and the student will have that assigned to them only. So very simple and easy to do. So once the decks are assigned, now this is a little bit different. I can, the students will then go in and complete all the decks on their own. And then once they have completed them, it's time to look at the data. And this is probably one of my favorite features of Booms, because let's say, you know, sometimes I'm running in and out and I'm really busy and I'm not quite sure if I got my data written down. But if the student has logged into their account and completed the deck, you are going to have all the information right there. So you don't need to worry about getting out your paper and pencil and documenting how they performed on this assessment. And you can just go back and review all your data at a later date. So let's go back over here. We're going to go look. And so here's our assignments. Then we're going to go to here, which is reports. So let's go back to that. We're going to go to currently assigned. All right, so let's say here is where you have to select the deck that you want to look at. They're going to do it by deck. So we wanted to look at multiple meaning words by definition. As you can see, it's going to come up down here, and it's going to have all of the students that participated or completed the stack. And as you can see, I don't really see anything coming up here. So I'm going to click on another one of my decks, because this, it must have been the other definition one. So there we go. We're going to then close this. As you can see, you can do multiple views at a time. But since the student hadn't gotten to, I think this was deck C, we'll go over to the next deck. And as you can see, this is a great way to look at what the students have done. Right here, you can see it's 2.0. That means they have played 2 times. So that first column is showing you how many times they made an attempt on the lesson. Then another way to take a look at the data is what was their average score. This student, as you can see, was at 85%. The next student was at 60%. An 80% and a 70%. So really, I like that, being able to see their average. And then it shows you their best attempt. So we go right here and it says 100%, 10 out of 10, and then 60. Then you can see if they've improved their first attempt versus their last attempt. So 7 out of 10, 10 out of 10, which is great. And I also love this feature down here, which gives you a legend. So what everything is. So all reports for selected students. It shows you their plays, their gems, their time. So if you're just not quite sure what you're looking at, there is that legend down there. So I wanted to make sure everyone saw that. And so then if you want to take a look at the data by the class, so this is kind of really where you look at the students, but you have the whole class in one place. But if you want to analyze the data by class, what you're going to do is you're going to click on this link right here. And here it comes up with report by the students. Again, this is another great way to look at the data. You can sort it by any one of these top. So you can sort it by their name. You can sort it by the time. And I like this time feature too, because you can kind of look at and see if students are hurrying through it. And you maybe could see, oh, well, they really were rushing through that. I can see why they probably made some mistakes. And so here we have that time spent, the status, whether it's they didn't get through the whole thing, whether it's done, the number correct, and the incorrect number. So if we go here, let's see by correct. Not sure if it's getting there. So we'll go on. If we go over here to report by cards, this is a great way to look at maybe a specific word was giving them a difficult time, or maybe you can go back, and if you have like a standard, sometimes if you have a deck with a standard on each card, this would be a great way to go do that. You could put one standard on each card, and then you could see maybe which standards. I could do question with a multiple meaning word on this card, and then the next card I could do an idiom, and the next card I could do a metaphor, and the next card I could do a simile. And then you could go through and actually look at what card was the most difficult for the students, and it could help you really modify your instruction and reteach what the students weren't understanding. So as you can see here too, you look at this card right here, and it will tell you which question they got right. So first we'll go over here. They got 3 people got this 100% correct, and 7 people got this incorrect. But if you look over here, this was the red. This was the, it says to most people, this was the most question that was incorrect. And that was they had select to take time off. So that kind of gives you, well, oh, maybe I should reword that, or maybe I should explain this meaning of the word further, because half of the students did not get that correct. And then it looks like for this definition, everyone got it correct. And then this other meaning, a few people missed it, but it really wasn't significant. And then right here where there's, nothing, everyone was clearly knew that that wasn't one of the definitions to select. So again, this is a great way to really take a look and analyze that data. And there's so many versatile ways to use it.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Jane.
And then I just want to, to say too, that boom cards, you can take a look for who has completed a lesson. Like that's not even showing up right there. It's a great way you can say, well, one of my students hasn't been finishing all of their work. So maybe they haven't finished a lesson. So you can even see that through the boom cards. You can see how often a student has played a deck. Maybe if they really like a deck, and they'll maybe keep practicing it, because sometimes they'll use them for that purpose. The students' accuracy percentage across all their plays, which we took a look at. You can see if a student improved on subsequent attempts, as we said, their first try and then their last try, which is really great because you want to make sure they're learning. And then you can see how quickly they answered. Again, I said that. And then you want to see how many cards are in a deck have been mastered. So again, as I said, that's a great way to add other literary things that you may be working on.
Super. Thank you so much. We do have a question that I think is interesting just to note right now while we're looking and talking about reports and as well standards. Do you ever search, either of you, Angie or Jane, for alternative standards? And are you familiar with them? No.
I'm not familiar myself. I'm not really familiar with them.
I was not familiar with them myself, but I just wanted to know if either of you ever worked with them. And I see that we are able to search for alternative standards in the Boom store. So I wanted to make sure that we did answer that, and that was for Lisa. So you can put alternative standards into the search bar under decks, and you will come up with decks that are made for alternative standards. So I wanted to just make sure we let you all know that. Johnny, did you have something that you added to that?
Yeah, one more thing is that I was looking in the store and I found a new publisher. The store name is Alternate Assess Me. So yeah, you can probably reach out to that author and just let them know, hey, are you creating this? Or I really need this. And yeah, maybe they'll be able to create that for you. So just in case, that's a new store that is literally called Alternate Assess Me. So
Alternate Assess Me. Super. Thank you so much, Johnny. So our last question today is for Angie, and then we're going to leave time to open up to the questions that we have in our Q&A box. And please feel free to ask anything you like right now. This is your time to ask those questions. But the question for Angie is how to find printables in the Boom store that are aligned with educational standards to keep kids engaged. So some of you may or may not know printables that we use with our Boom decks, but Angie's going to inform us quickly. So Angie, go ahead, take it away. Thanks so much.
Okay, great. Let me go back to the Boom screens. My other one is still up here. So let me go back to the printables. So let's go to the store. So there's a lot more decks available than printables, but if you look along the top band, you can see a choice for printables and you can see what's available. I need to remove the word sampler there and take off these grade levels and take this word sampler out again. And I just want to search for fractions. Now, boom cards are great, lots of fun for students, but sometimes you might want a group activity and a boom card might not be appropriate, like a boom deck might not be appropriate, but take a look at what's under the printables. For example, here's one, fractions bingo, okay? So this is a nice deck that compares, our students have to be able to choose the right image for a particular fraction. Sometimes if you find a printable from an author you like, you can click on the author's name and see what else they've created. And looks like this author's also created a fraction of the day activity, a chance for students to actually draw on paper. So, so there are various options under printables. Basically, when you're searching for printables, you can kind of search keywords just like you would for decks. You would just put them, put them in the spot here. If we put in that same one we had for the decks, 3.md.d.8. Now this says nothing came up. So again, there's not always something there. I should have searched this one ahead of time, but if we search perimeter under printables, I am not sure why it didn't come up right now. Oh, it's because I'm on hands-on learning. I'm sorry. I didn't take away that author name. So she doesn't have anything for fractions. So let's go back to fractions now that I've gone back to the main printable section. Sorry about that. So now you can see there's a lot of options for fraction printables. Anyways, so basically you can search using a standard or a phrase as you would with decks, but just make sure you click that printables tab and make sure you clear out any previous search terms that you were using that aren't appropriate for your current search. I was going to say something about a couple freebies, but I can save that for tips if you want. What do you think in terms of time?
We're probably cutting it a little bit close on time, so let's save it and then.
Okay, sounds good. Let me stop the share here.
Thank you for sharing that. We have a lot of publishers that match boom cards with those printables, and that is amazing to use either for homework, test prep, in the classroom, and all that stuff.
Super. So more questions from our Q&A. We will open this up now since we only have a few minutes left for any more questions that you guys might have. I know someone asked was that Deborah asked if standards vary greatly from state to state. Deborah Alexander asked that, I believe, if they vary a lot across states. And Angie, maybe you can correct me if I'm wrong, but it's approximately, because they're changing and they don't always have the updated for this year. I think 41 states are using Common Core standards right now. I was teaching in Texas. They use TEKS, which is their own standards body. Florida uses their own standards body, Georgia. So we have quite a few states still using their own standards body, and often will say that they're based off the Common Core standards. But we have the majority using Common Core standards at this point. So I hope that.
Yes, I agree with that. It's just if you're in a state that's not using Common Core, one thing you can do is look for a crosswalk type document. They may have most of the same topics as other states. They just might have different numbering. And if you haven't heard the term crosswalk, that's something you should look up for your state if your state does not use Common Core. And you might find a nice handy chart that says Texas TEKS matches Common Core, number, whatever it is.
Absolutely. I can speak from experience as a teacher in Texas. I felt like I didn't have access to as much standards tagged information or curriculum that I needed. And so I would do exactly what Angie's saying. I would look at what my TEK was, and then I would type those keywords in and use the Common Core standard so that I knew I was still hitting that learning target, but then I had much more curriculum to pull from for activities. So definitely
I was
Yeah.
going to say the same thing is for Pennsylvania. They have their own numbering system, but they're based off the Common Core. So in my decks, I do put the Pennsylvania as well as the Common Core. So
Perfect. Yeah, that works too. And do authors make decks to address international standards? Would you know about that, Angie?
I have not seen them specifically. I think a lot of international authors realize that they should add in some keywords or some standards that match Common Core.
So they're usually searching with keywords. So that's there's always a workaround for some of the standards that, we are asked to use. And so keywords is really a good one of those. Okay, do we have any more questions? How about this question? Maybe this is for Jane. How many times do you review a given standard throughout the year to make sure that a student retains that learning objective?
well, as a
Yeah, because
well, as a special ed teacher, each individual is so different. You have to get to know your students, their learning style. Some are going to take, they could take 10 sessions to get to a mastery skill, where others, who don't have any memory issues or things like that may be able to do it quickly. But one thing I do think the Boom is very helpful on it. I think it really does accurately engage the student, keep their attention. So it's a good assessment if they have mastered it. Because sometimes they really will attend to that if they're not tending to a printable or they're not tending to a worksheet. But most of the time that students who do have some of the learning issues, the Boom cards have been really, I think, a better accurate assessment for if they know the skill.
Perfect. That's a great
I have
answer.
a comment on that also. Some people may not realize that a lot of Boom decks, the author set it to scramble. And especially like with my decks that have multiple matching activities, students can do them over and over and they don't know they're getting some of the same questions, just in a different order with the answers in a different spot. You can't memorize, on screen one, the answer is going to be the last two choices or something like that, because of the way they do all the automatic scrambling.
Perfect. Thank you so much. Well, we have 2 minutes left. I want to remind everyone before we go as well that our next webinar is Embracing ChatGPT, and it's AI siblings in education. So please join us for that. But I want to just say a huge thank you to Jane and Angie today for doing such a great job helping us demystify educational standards and how we use Boom cards to do that as well. So I really want to thank you all, and thanks to all the attendees who came out to see us today for this webinar. We appreciate you being here. Thanks a lot.
Thank you for hosting. Great. Bye.
Section.